Hello everyone, welcome to Study IQ. My name is Prashant Dhawan and in this video we shall talk about Chandrayaan 2 mission. So in this video we will cover all these important questions. What is Chandrayaan 2 all about? Why is it so special? I will explain everything in detail. Then we will also discuss, have we entered the Asian space race? Where do India, Japan and China stand? Then we will also discuss what is the importance of the moon. Why are all these countries suddenly working on lunar missions? What is the rationale behind it? So a lot to know, a lot to discuss. Let's start. But before we start our discussion, I would like to tell you guys about Study IQ's pen drive and tablet courses. Our courses are available for various exams like SSC, Bank, RBI Grade B, UPSC. So visit studyiq.com, order the course of your choice and start studying from home for any examination. You can also call these numbers over here for more information. The moon, Earth's only permanent natural satellite. If you think about it, the dinosaurs saw the moon. The moon was there when the dinosaurs roamed the earth and they probably lifted their necks and saw this beautiful celestial round object in the sky. The first human being saw the moon. And for thousands of years, human beings have been inspired. They were always awestruck when they saw this beautiful white object in the sky. It is part of our culture, our literature, our traditions as well. We relate a lot of things to the moon. But we don't really know much about this beautiful object in the sky now, do we? The first endeavor to know more about the moon was initiated by USSR. The Soviet Union's Luna program was the first to reach the moon with unmanned spacecraft in 1959. Some even call this the beginning of the space race between USA and USSR. Under the Luna program, USSR sent many unmanned spacecrafts to the moon to understand what its surface is made of, does it have a magnetic field or not, and they managed to collect a lot of information from the Luna program. After that, a major milestone was reached by USA. Apollo 11 was the first space flight that landed the first two human beings on the moon. Finally, man was on the moon, and the first man to be on the moon was Neil Armstrong. The second one, of course, was Buzz Aldrin. And since then, we have made a lot of developments in our endeavors to understand the moon. So far, 12 men have walked the surface of the moon, all of them Americans. First, Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, and of course Buzz Aldrin, the first two men to walk on the surface of the moon. After that, Apollo 12, Apollo 14, 15, 16, and the last Apollo mission was Apollo 17, where Eugene Cernan was the last person who ever walked on the surface of the moon till 2018, of course. Sometime in the future this might change. So we can clearly see that United States of America had convincingly won the space race and now was leading the way in lunar exploration. But soon other countries caught up and India caught up in 2008 when it launched the Chandrayaan 1 mission. So Chandrayaan 1 was launched in October 2008 and it operated until August 2009. The estimated cost of this project was 386 crore rupees. It achieved a lot of things. Chandrayaan 1 was able to understand the moon a lot better and it provided ISRO with a lot of information. Among its many achievements, the greatest achievement, and make sure that you pay attention to this one because we will discuss this a lot. The main achievement of Chandrayaan 1 was the discovery of the widespread presence of water molecules in the lunar soil. So does that mean that there is water on the moon? Yes, actually. The moon has water, although not in liquid form. You see, liquid water cannot persist on moon's surface and water vapor is decomposed by sunlight and other elements as well. Of course, this is because the moon does not have an atmosphere. Why doesn't the moon have an atmosphere? Because its gravity is very low. Moon's gravity, as you know, is 1/6 of that of Earth's. And because of other reasons as well, the moon does not really have an atmosphere. It doesn't really have any shield from the sun rays of the sun, and that is why you cannot really expect any liquid water on the surface of the moon. Now in front of you is a beautiful sight. This is the Earth and its moon. You can see this is Earth, our home, and this right here, this is the moon orbiting the Earth. Now, scientists always knew that since the moon doesn't really have an atmosphere, we cannot really expect liquid water on its surface. But scientists, even in 1960s, especially the Russian scientists, they understood that the polar caps of the moon could harbor some frozen water, especially the south pole of the moon, the dark side of the moon. This side of the moon doesn't really get a lot of exposure to the sun's rays, and it is actually ridiculously cold over here. Now, our endeavor should be to find out what exactly lies in this part of the moon, and this is where Chandrayaan 2 comes in. Now, before we discuss how Chandrayaan 2 will help us unravel the mysteries of the south pole of moon, let's understand what exactly is Chandrayaan 2 mission all about. Chandrayaan 2 is India's second mission to the moon. The first one was Chandrayaan 1, of course, and it is a totally indigenous mission comprising of an orbiter, lander, and a rover. So after reaching 100 kilometers lunar orbit, the lander housing the rover will separate from the orbiter. I will explain in an infographic as well, but for the time being, just understand this. Actually, let's just go to the infographic. So as you can see, this is our lovely Earth, isn't it? So the GSLV will launch the Chandrayaan 2 mission from the Earth's gravity in the space, and then it will reach the moon. So after reaching the moon, the orbiter in the Chandrayaan mission will keep on orbiting the moon, alright. But the orbiter will detach a lander. Now what exactly is a lander? Well, look, ISRO's ambition is to actually land a rover on the moon, something like this. This is what ISRO aspires to do, to land an Indian rover on the dark side of the moon, the south pole of the moon, so that we can do a lot of research over there. Now understand this, ISRO will probably drop the rover from the orbiter and it will have to take a huge fall. We need to make sure that the rover lands safely. This is why we need a lander, and this is why soft landing will play such a critical role, because it will have to make sure that the rover is landed safely on the moon's surface so that it can conduct all the scientific research over there that it needs to conduct. So the total cost of this project will be around 800 crore rupees, definitely a lot cheaper than a lot of Hollywood movies. And the launch vehicle that will be used will be GSLV F10. Now the purpose of this mission is to collect data on lunar topography, mineralogy, elemental abundance, and lunar exosphere and signatures of water ice. Now let's talk about moon rover. Till date, 3 countries have had rovers on moon: the Soviet Union, the United States of America, and most recently China. Lunokhod 1 was the first moon rover to be on the surface of the moon, and it was sent by the Soviet Union in 1970. It looked a bit like this. I know it doesn't really look like a very fancy piece of technology, but we are talking about 1970 over here. So it looks pretty decent if we compare it to that era, and it pretty much did what it had to on the lunar surface. And let's also discuss China's U2 rover. It was launched on 1st December 2013 and it reached the moon's surface on 14 December 2013. U2 was an unmanned lunar rover that formed the part of China's Chang'e 3 mission to the moon. Now, one thing that I need to tell you guys about is that China targeted the Mare Imbrium area of the lunar surface. Have a look at this map of the lunar surface. This huge crater right here, this is the Mare Imbrium. This crater was probably formed by an impact of an asteroid or some other foreign object in the space. All these craters on the moon, they also tell us that space is a very violent place where objects keep crashing into each other. All these round circles that you see on the moon, they weren't really aesthetically created to make the moon beautiful. They are the result of violent impacts of asteroids hitting the lunar surface. And a lot of scientists and astrophysicists believe that if we do a lot of research on the craters on the moon, we might unravel some of the mysteries of the origin of the moon. Now, I would also like to mention that India will be focusing on the southern part of the moon right here, where the ice caps are. USA and USSR have always focused on the equatorial region of the moon, right here. This is the equatorial region of the moon, and they always landed their lunar rovers and their spacecrafts right over here. So you can see China, the West, and well, I'm counting Russia in the West over here as well, even though geographically it's not really part of the West. So USA and Russia have always targeted this area, China is targeting this area, and India is targeting the southern part. Now, as you can see, this is the Chinese U2 rover. It's quite tiny. It reached the lunar surface in 2013, and India will accomplish this feat 5 years later in 2018. One thing I would like to mention over here is that this rover didn't really last very long. It lasted on the lunar surface for just about 14 days, although it was meant to last for a lot longer. After that, it had some technical glitch and it stopped working over here. But it is still stationary and it is collecting some data and it is sending it back to China. Now, one thing I would like to mention over here is that India's lunar rover will last for 14 days as well. It is meant to last only 14 days because the scientists at ISRO believe that 14 days are enough for this lunar rover to do all the experiments they wanted to do on the south pole of the moon. How will it work? Look, the rover will do all the research on the ground, then it will send the data to the lunar orbiter, alright, and then the orbiter will send the data back to ISRO. So this is how the entire system will work. Now this brings us to a very basic question. Are India, Japan and China locked in a space race? Well, it is a very intriguing question. You see, 2 generations ago, the space race was a Cold War subplot pitting the USA against the USSR. Of course, USA won. It won both the Cold War and the space race. And now India and Japan have their lunar missions each. Both of them have had a lunar mission in the past, and both the lunar missions were successful. And Japan's JAXA, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, lunar orbiter spacecraft Selene landed on moon in 2009, 1 year after Chandrayaan 1. Now, when it comes to lunar exploration, India and Japan are pretty much on equal footing, although India will get the upper hand after our rover is landed on the lunar surface. But we also need to understand a very basic fact that both the countries, India and Japan, pale in comparison to China's accomplishment. China's 2003 moon rover U2 was its 3rd successful lunar mission. So China has had more lunar missions than India and Japan combined. The Chinese National Space Administration, this is their space agency, it has a huge budget. Its budget is bigger than that of India's, much bigger than that of India's, and it gives China a lot of financial muscle to make sure that its missions are completed on time and they use the best equipment. China in 2003 became the 3rd country to put a man in space as well, with its own rocket after Soviet Union and US. India hasn't even been able to achieve that. We do not know when we will see the first Indian in space with our own rocket launchers, of course. We have seen Rakesh Sharma, but of course he was taken to the space by the Soviets. So we need to catch up, and for the